New York, big city of dreams. New York, big city of dreams.
Oh, hey there. What's up, KOT family? How about those Knicks? Great win last night. Believe it was their seventh in a row. And I happened to be at a watch party. My family had a couple of friends over, friends of the family, family itself. And everyone was watching the game and playing board games, eating snacks. And it was a really great game to watch with people who don't watch basketball. The majority of people who were there not only didn't watch the Knicks, but didn't watch the NBA at all. But they watched a 55-point game explosion from Jalen Brunson, and it led to a lot of good conversations and a lot of good ideas that I had that I wanted to discuss with you guys, the KOT family. So one of my friends is a friend of my stepsister, and he's a gay Latino, probably 29, 30, into fashion, into phones, and technology, pop culture, not into sports at all. No issue. I myself am not really into sports outside of the basketball. But he was watching the game, and he had no idea who Jalen Brunson was, no idea who the Knicks were, or who the Wizards were, had no idea who was good, who was bad, who the best players were. But he was watching Brunson, and it was the only comment he made that was outside of just the general game and how close it was. He looked at Brunson and said, "Damn, that guy is really good." And it made me think that even someone who doesn't have a storied or lengthy understanding of basketball or X's and O's can look at Jalen Brunson as the smallest guy out there, someone who obviously lacks the same level of athleticism or size as the rest of his compatriots, and still being able to acknowledge that he is one hell of a basketball player, that whatever his craft is, he must be the peak. He didn't even know he had 55 points at that point. He just saw him carve up the Wizards defense and also go shot for shot with the Wizards players in terms of Justin Champagne and lead them to a win in overtime. And I think that in itself impressed upon someone with zero understanding of who Brunson was or why the Knicks are good or relevant, that this guy is an expert in his job, profession, and craft. Why is that? Jalen Brunson has really taken another step this year in reserving his energy and reserving his output to when the Knicks need it most. This helps in him not having to overexert himself. He hasn't picked up so many nicks, these physical limitations, like maybe a slightly pulled hamstring or ankle issues or sore knee. We haven't heard too many instances of him having to take time off from games or sit because of that. In fact, there was actually an assumption he might sit last night, and he didn't because he was fully healthy. Even though he is playing, I believe he's top 5 in minutes per game, it's the usage and how Thibodeau is using him, allowing him to go more off ball and even letting the offense be ran through Karl-Anthony Towns, and in some instances through Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby or even Josh Hart at the elbow in that Draymond action. Brunson now is able to deliver these type of performances when we need it at the very most, off of a back-to-back, against a team that is very scrappy and missing maybe their best players, but also their biggest Achilles heels. Guys that are high volume, empty stat scorers like Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma were both out. So it allowed guys at the New York born and bred Justin Champagne to step in and deliver a plus 30-point performance. And sometimes when you're playing these hungry teams, and of course, you know the curse of the Knicks is role players have career nightstand and stuff, and they have really since the entire Dolan era. We'll get to that later. It allowed them to play more of a free-flowing style of basketball. The ball moved. They actually ended up with more assists than us, which rarely happens, especially a team like Wizards, who are one of the worst teams in the NBA, if not the worst. But I was really amazed at Brunson knew which moment to take over and which to defer to his teammates. And another night where Karl-Anthony Towns wasn't 100%, they still combined for 85 points, 17 rebounds, 12 dimes, and 31 for 50 field goal percentage shots. That is unbelievable that we have a dynamic duo that can oscillate between one being on ball and one being off ball and switch as needed, that has formulated into the best pick and roll point of attack in the entire NBA. Two guys that are both legitimate MVP candidates. I can't think back, certainly not in my fandom, but even within my lifetime, of a better Knicks duo than these two and Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson since the days of Walt Clyde Frazier and Willis Reed, which was before I was even a twinkle in my father's eye. Right. So even though my buddy, who had never watched the Knicks before and never even know who Jalen Brunson was, couldn't pick Jalen Brunson out of a lineup with four other guys, was able to watch Jalen Brunson rise in moments of crunch time. Because one thing you can look at, even as a novice observer, is, oh, there's 30 seconds on the clock. That means the game is close. Oh, the game is tied. That means you need someone to step up. And the person that he watched time and time again on ball and making clutch shots was Brunson. The Brunson burner has really become an all-around point guard. He's increased his assists per game to 8, giving you 8 dimes, which means he's also impacting the rest of the players on the floor and allowing them to be the best version of themselves. And we've seen that from Mikal Bridges increasing his scoring load and percentages in the month of December from November, and also an OG Anunoby becoming a legitimate third, fourth option in the NBA. So I just want to start the show giving proper acknowledgement to Jalen Brunson and how dominant he was last night, giving us 55 points, 9 assists, and 3 rebounds in 44 minutes, including really leading us to the victory along with Josh Hart in overtime. Hart himself, man, what another guy. 13 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists. OG probably was the quietest of his starters tonight with only 9 points and 4 boards, but also played really good defense, I think, in allowing the Knicks to say, okay, Justin Champagne, you're going to be the guy that we're going to allow to go off, and we're going to really keep everyone else to a decent scoring output and not being able to kill us in multiple ways. You had Malcolm Brogdon to be 22, but I think, in my opinion, at this point in Brogdon's career, if he's giving you over 20 points per game, the team he's on is probably going to lose. The rest of the other guys, you had 18 from Bilal Coulibaly, 17 from Bub Carrington, and 12 sets and 5 from Alex Sarr, who has actually impressed me this far. Typically, these Euro French bids that come over here that aren't named Wembanyama haven't really shown to be a great player since maybe Boris Diaw. This guy, actually, his athleticism and outside shot, he looks to be possibly scary hours in 2 or 3 years as a fourth or fifth option for the Wizards or wherever else he ends up being. But the stats, too, I wanted to point out. There have been 3 this season, 3 metrics that I try to pinpoint on that I think are indicative of if we're going to win the game. And tonight, we had about 2 out of 3 of them. The first one was our free throw shooting. We shot 92%, 24 out of 26. Rebounds, we only lost by 1, but we had 43, which I think is a good all-around number for us. Wizards outbested us 44-43. And then assists tonight, we only had 26. The number I look for is 30. That to me, I think is the metric of a team that can be champion caliber, is averaging around 30 assists, because you're not over depending on one guy carrying the load offensively, nor is your offense heliocentric and really is ISO based, which the Knicks have been under Tom Thibodeau so many years in the past. But it wasn't just about Jalen Brunson. Who were those other guys? Tonight, I mentioned before, Karl-Anthony Towns gave you 30, 14, and 3. Mikal Bridges, very efficient night, and really led the way in the first quarter with an array of scoring. We really saw all 3 levels of scoring. 3-point percentage. We saw him pull up with those nasty, filthy mid-range shots. And he also got to the basket and scored pretty creatively, I thought, bending and twisting his body, contorting his body to hit layups in traffic and in a dunker spot in the half-court sets. Was very impressed by Mikal Bridges' off-ball movement, which is a staple of his identity. Someone who's always there with the backdoor cuts or slashes to the basket, and someone to me who is always also running off of off-ball pick, ball screen to get open or at least decoy for Brunson to have his defender hedge and possibly leave him with an easier shot as well. Yeah, Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson, unbelievable performance combined today in the pick and roll game. Really is something we can really rely on as one of our most efficient actions, if not our most efficient action in tight games, where that really hasn't been a strength of ours in years past. There was a few months in there where Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson were giving us pretty efficient shot making in the pick and roll, but Karl-Anthony Towns' ability to step back and be a pick and pop option on the perimeter, a consistent pick and pop option, not someone who goes up and down in the 3-point percentage, but someone who can really depend upon. I watched so many times last night, it's sucking the defense away from the hoop, which allows those off-ball cutters, OG, Hart, Bridges, to get easy hoops under the basket. So a really solid win by the Knicks. Not every win is going to be a blowout. Not every win is going to be all 5 guys score over 20 points. But tonight was a game where we need Jalen Brunson to do Jalen Brunson things, and my main man delivered. Also, incredible stat that I heard. This is, again, totally indicative. And when my friend heard this stat, he was like, damn, has this team won a championship? I had to tell him not yet, but it's on its way. The New York Knicks tonight, We're the first team in NBA history, think about this, history to have four guys score over 40 points before January 1st. That is really a stretch of about 2.5 months of basketball that's allotted for you to have four guys in your offense to get hot simultaneously within that 2.5 month stretch to have a 40-point game. It almost never happens in the NBA to even have the ability to have four guys in your roster who can score 40, much less to do it before January 1st, which is why the Knicks set the record and shows the type of roster that Leon Rose has built here. It's absolutely should win him, in my opinion, Executive of the Year. I was thinking back, since I've been watching hoops in 2002, what team do I think could have actually had four guys that could have scored 40 at one point before January 1st? It's tough because if you go back before 2018-19, not a lot of teams were shooting really high three-point volume, which I think is really the only way that you can have four guys drop over 40 is if you're shooting a lot of threes. And you have four guys specifically who can not only shoot threes, make threes, but shoot them at a high volume and also score on three levels. I thought maybe like the 2003-4 Mavs with the big three of Dirk, Nash, Finley, and Van Exel. That was really the only team when I thought about it. And last year's Celtics that could even pull something like that off. Which leads me to another thought. I've seen some speculation around Twitter about whether after this game and Brunson having to score 55 in order for us to beat the Wizards, do we need a quote-unquote sixth man off the bench, a guaranteed bucket getter on the pine that Tibbs can rotate in when we have nights where maybe OG doesn't have it or maybe Karl-Anthony Towns is in foul trouble. And I thought about this before I had a knee-jerk reaction, and I also did my research. And I looked at the modern NBA because to me, the modern NBA is really only indicative in terms of the way teams are playing right now, factoring in the three-point line, factoring in the ratio of the mid-range, factoring in less zone defense, more man, more switching. That to me is the last two championships. The Denver Nuggets 2 years ago and the Boston Celtics last year. Both those teams only had one guy off the bench that was giving you 10 points per game. Denver had five starters that all were in double figures, and then they had KCP, Bruce Brown, depending on who was starting, off the bench and gave you around 10. Last year, Celtics team had Al Horford, who was giving you 9 off the bench. After that, Peyton Pritchard, a guy who's averaging 15 this year because of KP's injuries, last year was only giving you 6. So to me, the Knicks already have that. They have their five guys who are probably the five best scorers in the best starting five in the NBA. Five guys who can all hit their own shots 3 different ways. And then you have Deuce McBride giving you 10 points off the bench. And I actually think, and once he's fully acclimated and his minutes still up a little bit, I think Landry Shamet to be close to 9. I really believe that he can hit 3 threes a game and average a pretty solid 9 points. He's also someone who isn't afraid to attack the basket and can actually score off a dribble, as he did with his first shot with the Knicks, returning from injury, being able to pull up on ball and give you an unbelievable shot in the mid-range. He's wet from distance. So I don't think the Knicks really need to make any significant moves. I also don't think there are players out there after the recent acquisition of the Lakers by Dorian Finney-Smith that make a whole lot of sense for us to trade Mitch. Mitch, as Ebony tweeted earlier today, is the missing piece for this team. And I really believe that you need that guy to break glass like a fire extinguisher and pull out in emergencies, particularly in the finals when we're going to be faced up against either a combination of Gafford and Lively with Dallas, or Jokic with Denver, or Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein and OKC. I think those are the 3 teams I'm looking at that are possibly the most legitimate contenders in the West. And they all have really nice bigs. And that's where Mitchell Robinson is going to come in. So Cat can focus on offense and Mitch can focus on defense. And Precious doesn't get overwhelmed and abused by one of these really all-star level bigs. And we have that depth. I think that's what Mitchell Robinson is ready for. And yeah, I'm being hyperbolic. I'm already contextualized us in the finals because that's what my mind's at, watching this team day in and day out and then thinking about them day in, day out, and then talking about them on the KOT show. I really believe this is a championship contender team. And if we end up in the finals this year, we are going to need Mitchell Robinson to be that safety valve off the bench. It's going to be crucial. So all that being said, I do not think the Knicks, just because we went on a back-to-back down to the wire in overtime with the Washington Wizards, it means we have to pull out some Leon Rose magic and trade Mitchell Robinson for some guaranteed spark play off the bench. Jordan Clarkson ain't going to come here and save us. I advocated him before when the roster looked very different, But as I said then, I will reiterate now, he's a horrible corner three shooter. That doesn't match what we need offensively and what type of shots are open within Tibbs' esteems. To me, I think we should just stay the course and allow Deuce and Cameron Payne and Landry Shamet and Precious Achiuwa to all rotate and give what they need to give on different nights. And as long as we have that 10-point per game score anchoring and Deuce and one of those other guys giving you 8 to 9, how are we not going to win the championship this season? No disrespect to the Boston Celtics. I think the New York Knicks are better, and I trust Jalen Brunson over Jason Tatum in the clutch every day of the week. So, all right, I've talked enough. Let me give a shout out to some of the people that we have here in the chat on a very cool, breezy Sunday afternoon. All right, man. Let's say only Fritz Cinder is commenting. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing in terms of how my podcasting is doing tonight, but I do see that we have over 30 watching in the chat, so I appreciate y'all, man. I hope Pits for Timmy is somewhere in there loading the clip, ready to unleash on me and my ass crack Tates. Much love to you all, man. I'm looking forward to playing the Wizards again. I do believe that it's extremely hard, as NBA history tells us, to beat the same team twice in a 3-game stretch. So they're going to be ready for us. They also have a complete more than 48 minutes of game tape to look over how we played them. And they're going to be sneaky because you don't know who's going to go off with their main guys continuing to sit. It's really role players can feast on us like a buffet, as they usually do. But I do not believe at the end of the day they had the firepower to beat us again. So I think we should knock the Wizards off for 8 in a row, which sets us up nicely with 2 other additional easy games before we face the biggest test, 2 games in 3 days against the OKC Thunder in the middle of January. I think, as I said to Jay Ellis, is going to be the real true benchmark this season for where we are as a team. I'm interested to see how we handle Isaiah Hartenstein. Interested to see how we guard Jalen Williams, the good Jalen, not the bad Jalen, the one who plays just like Jason Tatum and who's a lockdown, elite defender, great point of attack defender, help defender, one-on-one defender. He's unbelievable. And I think how we guard him and how Brunson manages being guarded by him is going to be crucial because Brunson's going to see a lot of different looks with Caruso, Dort at SGA, and even when they have Isaiah Hartenstein guarding at the level. I think Brunson's going to have to learn how to navigate around him as well, something he might be familiar with, having played against him for so long. That's it, man. I'm really excited about having an easy schedule and allowing different guys to get in a rhythm, specifically Cam Payne, Precious Achiuwa, and Landry Shamet. While we're playing these terrible teams, it can really gain some rhythm because we're going to need all of their contributions against those 2 games against OKC. But I hope all of y'all have a very happy new year, and catch me on Twitter at @LeEscobedo, LeEscobedo in today's book club, because I'm going to make it a very important part of my contribution on the show to always have a book at hand to recommend, because I think reading is really, after last night's game of Trivial Pursuit, I think a lot of people in America are putting down the books and picking up the phones and doing a lot of passive reading nowadays instead of active. And it's such fun having your imagination charged and active in filling out and illustrating a story, accompanying the words in your mind. I think it's one of the great things that humanity has ever invented is a capacity to read and interpret and then distill. So my book today is The Dutchman by Leroy Jones, a.k.a. Amiri Baraka, the Black revolutionary poet, playwright, artist, writer, thinker from the 1970s. This was a play that he wrote when he was basically in the divorce processes with his ex-wife, who was a Jewish New Yorker, that his issues with race and class struggles in the 60s kind of influenced him end up divorcing his wife because he got called out by a lot of other fellow Black revolutionaries for being married to a white woman. So he talked about this in this book of A Dutchman, where a man and woman, white woman, Black man, are on a subway car in New York City, and they have a discussion which reflects both Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden, but also, as the title suggests, the slave ships as well. So lots of power dynamics, sexual dynamics, gender dynamics, racial dynamics, and a very short 2-act play. It takes you about 20 minutes to read, but 20 years to distill and understand. The Dutchman, Leroy Jones, a.k.a. Mary Baraka. Much love to you, KOT family. Thank you for putting up with me. Appreciate you. Pits for Timmy, I see you, my man. Fritz, David Smith, we appreciate you in the chat. Thank you for hanging out with us on this breezy Sunday afternoon. Also, The new issue of the New York Times, one of my favorite things to do on a Sunday is to sit outside my patio and read the Times. Today's New York Times Magazine has a really great eulogy of the great actor, speaker, poet, James Earl Jones. It has a couple of eulogies for actors and performers who died this and writers who died in 2024. James Earl Jones is one of them, and the writer really focuses on his early lack of speech. He was mute as a child after a very severe move to the South. Then later found his voice, a voice that became iconic, maybe the most iconic voice in American cinema. Darth Vader, Mufasa, Fences, but also really goes in on him as a man and his relationship to Shakespeare. Highly recommend. Another book suggested no by the New York Times. Read the great eulogy of James Earl Jones. We love you, man. And remember, it's a mess out here in these New York Knicks streets. So this is the show. That's the show. KOT loves you. So do I. We out.
New York, big city of dreams. New York, big city of dreams.
NYC.